Hello, everyone. Welcome in. My name is Mr. Marco, the Bearded Truth, Jason Lyon. Thank you all for coming in tonight. One moment while I make a little bit of noise for moving the microphone around a little bit. All right. Thank you guys all for joining in tonight. If you guys wouldn't mind, give me a moment. I'm going to be sharing this out, and I hope you guys will also do the same. Got a bunch of stuff to talk about tonight. So the more help, the more people that we can get in here. Obviously, we're going to hit a couple of controversial topics. It's going to be fun. We're going to be talking about universal basic income. We'll talk about Georgia and New York and what they're doing with the states. And we'll be talking a little bit about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's been making a little bit of headway in the news, and been making fitting through the cracks, if you will, between the narratives and the agendas. So, good reason to have that go down. So we'll talk about that, and then of course we might also be able to, if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about vaccines making their ways into the news. So we'll get into that discussion. Of course, controversy amok. It is what it is. So hope you guys have all been enjoying your day. Hopefully you guys are all ready to come in and have a great discussion. I do have the call-in line number. I haven't even introduced myself. I apologize, everyone. I am Mr. America, the Bearded Truth, Jason Lyon, and I want to thank you for joining in tonight. I am I'm a political commentator, right? Talk about all the politics here. I'm a libertarian at heart. Smaller the government, the better off we are. And, we'll have a discussion. This is the Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern show, which is always a fantastic time to come in. If this isn't a good time for you, we also have the shows on Tuesdays and Friday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern. So there's always a show out there. There's always something available to you to come in here. So thank you all for joining in tonight. I look forward to the discussion. And I thank you all for showing some support and retweeting this out, sharing this out, sharing this to your followers on YouTube and everywhere else. We're here to grow. So let's get into the first topic. I want to talk a little bit about universal basic income, specifically about the Lift the Middle Class Act. So this is straight from Kamala Harris's page, www.harris.senate.gov. And on October 18th, she talked about this, but this is finally coming out and making it to the news. And so this is a big piece of economic mumbo jumbo for a lot of people. So I want to try and break this down and really make this simplified so people can understand exactly what universal basic income is, or negative income relief, I think is the other term that has been utilized for it. So what this is a legislation to provide middle class, this is directly quoted from her, a legislation to provide the middle class and working families with a tax credit of up to $6,000 per year, or up to $500 a month, to address the rising cost of living. According to one survey, 57% of Americans do not have enough cash to cover $500 unexpected expense, meaning that a rent increase, a medical bill, or a child care expense could lead to a financial emergency. So they see this issue. The government sees this issue, and it wants to try to provide to the people. It wants to provide to the middle class, to the working families, and everything else. And so the lines that they have set for this. If you're a married couple and you got two people in your household, you can make up to $100,000, and you can be provided with $6,000 of a tax break, a tax write-off, if you will. And so that would be up to $3,000 for a single filer, or that's up to $3,000 if you're a single person making under $50,000. So at $50,000, that's where the line that they determined, that's an acceptable amount of money. Once you make more than that, you're just one of those greedy capitalists. If you're a family of two, if you make over $100,000, you're the greedy capitalist. So we must take from you to provide to others. We'll take from you to provide to others. And so what this is, at the crux of it, the crux of this entire conversation is that when the tax cuts came, they thought it was nasty that they would cut the revenue. They would cut the revenue from everybody who's paying taxes. Over 50% of the taxpayers were getting an increase or a decrease in the taxes that were being taken from them. And they said, these are crumbs. It's not enough money. It's going to bankrupt us. It's going to hurt the debt. It's going to drive up the deficit. And so this, of course, when you just take in less revenue, in the way that this plan is, somehow that's going to provide a different thing. So Democrats, once again, showing that they don't stand for what they say, but stand for anything that's just not Trump right now. And so going into this, here's another statistic. Welcome in, Kimmy. Here's another statistic that that Kamala Harris wanted to voice on her page, and that's the Institute of Taxation and Economic Policy, or ITEP, estimates that 1 of every 2 workers and 2 out of 3 children in America would be able to receive from this. So they're wanting to just say, look at how many people this is going to affect. How many people this is going to affect. This is why we have to do this. Now, there's basic arguments that are surrounding the idea of universal basic income and why that's not a good and prosperous decision. And for the first part, right, you're taking money from the upper brackets and you're saying, you guys have to pay for this. And those on the bottom, you don't have to pay for a thing. You don't have to pay for life. In this regards, right, it's just a small portion. It's, $6,000 or $3,000, depending on if you're single or married, that you receive. So it's all about, you didn't make enough for us, so we're going to give you some more. So it is absolute wealth redistribution. It is not something that has ever been endorsed by economics or economists because of the simple fact that it slows down your GDP growth. It slows down the rate in which money is recirculated into innovations, into research and development, into the growth of these markets. But it also just makes more people feel entitled. I'm entitled to more money because I haven't provided enough. And so you get this idea, right? And there's a basic truth that's out there. And the truth is, if you tax more, you get less of it. If you subsidize more, you get more of it, right? When we subsidize a market, when we subsidize farmers, for example, right, you get more farmers. More people want to get into there because there's less risk, because there's less responsibility there effectively. And so when you say, hey, you make less than $100,000, you can get $6,000 off. You can get $6,000 off. So if a guy's like, hey, I'm going to get this promotion, and they're like, hey, we're going to pay you $101,000. Oh, no. Keep it down. Keep it. If you pay me $99,000, if you give me $99,000 because I make the income for both me and my wife, I can make it effectively $4,000 more because of the $2,000 difference between the 101 and the 99,000, plus the $4,000 that's going to be the burden on the others. So you have this basic idea where we're purposely inflating, we're pushing down on people that would otherwise be successful in their own way, be successful within their own means, to encourage people not to be as prosperous. And now, of course, those that are not being as prosperous, not making it to these arbitrary thresholds, they're being subsidized by the people above. So we're encouraging people just to press down, just go ahead, stop making all that money. You're right on the cusp of $100,000. You're right on the cusp of $50,000 by yourself. Just go ahead and just take a couple more days off. Take a couple more unpaid days off, and enjoy your time, because you should be subsidized. You should be taken care of over others. I don't think that we really need to get into how this is contrary to the Constitution in itself, right? This is something we've harped on. The tenor of the Constitution was individual reliability. So, I got to move this way. I'm sorry, guys. So, the constitutionality, of course, this is directly perpendicular to the intent of the Constitution. The idea that one person's responsible for another person. But it just on the economic sides. So how much will this cost? How much will it cost in order to pay these people? Well, in accordance with taxfoundation.org, we found out a lot of really big, important things. So while Democrats said, hey, the tax cuts are going to reduce the revenue, and we just had reports coming out today, we've had reports coming out for the last couple of weeks, that the revenue has increased despite taking less money per transaction. This will inherently, there is no way around this, that the Lyft credit will reduce federal revenue by $2.7 trillion between 2019 and 2028. So $2.7 trillion that she's wanting to cost us. Put this in there, put the Medicare for all, $32 trillion over 10 years, put the free college education, put this, that, and the other, and we are just jacking up the spending and just throwing the revenue away. It's this idea that Democrats don't care about the cost of whatever it takes to feel good. They're here to feel good. So this is disgusting. So Lyft would slightly increase the weighted average marginal tax rate on labor, leading to 825,906 fewer full-time equivalent jobs and a 0.7% smaller economy in the long run, right? So this is only for a 10-year span. So we're losing 1% of our GDP. We're losing almost $1 million. Now, we should take this, and when she runs in 2020, go, you're already negative 800,000 jobs. You are already negative 800,000 jobs. You've already taken those out of the market before you even ran for president. And now you want to run for president of the United States? Get out of here. Obviously, you don't understand how the free market works. Obviously, you don't understand how liberty works. Obviously, you don't care about responsibility. You worry about feeling good. And you can feel good, but while not running the country. So we have a $2.7 trillion decrease in the revenue. We have 0.7% smaller GDP growth over this time. We have almost 1 million jobs being taken away. And it's all okay, because the idea is that if you provide to the people that aren't able to provide for themselves, you're going to give them a quality of life. You're going to give them something that they may not have had. And it's this idea that why is the government the one that is doing this? Why are we allowing the government to be the one to redistribute our wealth? Don't we have plenty of philanthropists in this country? Haven't the laws that have been enacted by these same legislators, aren't they preventing us from being as prosperous and or not as prosperous, but as giving to others? And now they're going to hold us at the threat of a cage and force us to be even more prosperous on their backs. So it's not that we can get the credit for the money that's being taken from us and being provided to others. It's that they get the credit for this, right? Kamala Harris is going to give the credit for giving out all this money to people on the lower scale. They don't have to be as responsible because they'll still get SNAP. They'll still get which is their food stamps. They'll still get all of their tax breaks and everything else that have been advocated for. They're going to live scot-free in this life. And it's all off the burden of others. When people vilify the Democrats, the mainstream Democrats, and they say that they're socialist, when you point at this, because you may think it's a slippery slope, but when you implement this and this isn't doing enough, when this isn't giving the results that you want, government doesn't go, well, we're just not going to get involved anymore. We're going to rescind ourselves from this. No, they build on it. They grow it out. And so more people will get onto this policy. More people will get into the system. And that's only going to lead to more people being forced to live off of the backs of others. Now, how are they going to force the top 1%? How are they going to force these people that are already paying more than the bottom 95% of the country? How are we going to get them to stay in this country? If they're being taxed out the ass, they're going to want to leave. And of course, they have the capacity. They have the ability to leave. I don't think that these smart businessmen are going to be the same as the Democrats, as the celebrities, as these people that say, look, if President Trump is going to be elected, I'm going to move to Canada because, Mexico they don't want to go to Mexico because they're racist. But, these businessmen, they're in business. They're in there to make money, and when they have to provide for everyone else, they're going to leave, just like they left in Puerto Rico, just like they left in Cuba, just like they left in literally every country out there that's been devastated by socialism. We're going to see this start, and we're going to see it continue to grow. There is no way that they step back. I thought cages were just for the kids. It's going to keep growing. It's just going to keep growing, and the reliance upon the 1% is just going to be there. And we're going to see the top 1% go away. We're going to see our country just turn into rubble if these are implemented at the federal level. If Commie California wants to implement these, go ahead, do it on your own state. And then once even Hollywood wants to leave, because Hollywood's not in favor of actually being a part of socialism, they're just there to advocate for it, then you lose out on that money. When you lose every one of the big industries there that are not required by the location that they're in, but they're just there because that's just naturally how they occurred, and they leave to go to other states, you go, oh, this is why it doesn't work. Because we can't force ourselves on the back of others. And I make it happen in California. Make it happen in California. Show me that it can work for 40 years. And after 40 years, if you want to implement it into Nevada, go ahead and talk to Nevada and get them to implement it. But until then, don't force it down the throats of every American. Do not do that. Stop destroying us. Stop subsidizing one state with another state. It's disgusting. It's unbecoming of the Senate. It's unbecoming of the entire federal government. Anyone that advocates for this at the federal level does not want to uphold their promise to uphold the Constitution, which is the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment, right? If it's not enumerated within the Constitution, it falls to the states or to the people. Not to the states' representatives, to the states. Ugh. So Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, in case if you wanted to know, they're still idiots. They're still out there endorsing full-on socialism, and they say it's for the middle class, but really what it's for is just to implement their views of socialism and the Keynesian economic plan, which it doesn't even work on paper. So the phone line is open, guys. If you guys want to call in, if you guys got something you guys want to say, whether it's in agreement or in dissent, feel free to call in, right? Because that was obviously universal basic income is a big topic. It does take a lot of wherewithal. If you got questions about it and you want to ask questions, feel free to ask about them. Always chime in whenever you have, if you feel as if something was not answered in the right way, or if you just disagreed, feel free to call in. Thank you for that. So I want to go over to Georgia, fly from the senator of California all the way over to Georgia, and we're gonna make this nice little swoop up the East Coast, if you will. So over in Georgia, they've been making the news for that wonderful, beautiful Second Amendment. Oh, I love it when news like this comes out. So HB 2 is being pushed right now, and this is being pushed by I gotta pull up his name. State Representative Matt Gertler, Republican from Tiger. He filed legislation to let anyone who is legally allowed to own a gun to carry it without paying for a state-issued license. Beautiful idea. Beautiful, beautiful idea, right? The idea of the Constitution. This is constitutional carry right here, folks. Constitutional carry means that if you have a gun, you are capable of carrying it concealed under the shirt or not concealed, right? Open carry. And that's where it's on the outside of the shirt. You can carry it however you see fit because you own a gun. There's a Second Amendment that governs over the federal government as well as the state government. And so shall not be infringed is the justification behind this. Now, Governor-elect Brian Kemp, right? We just saw the news of him coming through and finally winning after the 9 days, was it, that it took them to recount the ballots? Brian Kemp coming in, he said he's all in favor of this. He even said on the campaign trail, I hunt, I shoot, and I carry. So I'm excited to see Georgia go this way with this. Now, this doesn't mean that you get a Georgia carrying license. So if you are a Georgian, then this means that while you're within your own state, if you own a gun, you are able to carry it. You can still get the Georgia concealed carry license, which actually has reciprocity for other states around you. I think Georgia is one of the bigger states. So if you get their license, it's more available in more states. I think they've got like 18, 20, maybe even close to 30 states that you can now conceal carry in these states with having that license. So that will still be there for $75 and going through the background check. But if you just have a gun for home defense, for the defense of yourself, for the defense of others around you, you can go buy a gun, go through the screening process, go through your background checks to buy the gun, and then you're now capable of carrying in that state should this go through. Abrams did concede. Yes, ma'am. So, beautiful law coming through. That was HB 2, and that is going to enact constitutional carry down there in Georgia, just to my southern border. I'm excited to see that bill going through. Now, while we're on a high note, while we're talking about, yes, constitutional carry, adhering to the Constitution, how beautiful that is, we're going to move over to New York. New York, where it is clear that they don't care about the Constitution. All right, I got Mr. Beans calling in. How's it going, Beans?
What's up?
How are you doing tonight, sir?
Well, I'm doing just wonderful, but I've got an actual opinion on the whole Second Amendment and personal carry thing.
All right, let's hear it.
I would very much like to share with you.
Okay.
Here's my theory on this. The Second Amendment is part of the Constitution of the United States of America. Am I correct?
True statement, sir.
Okay. So, if the Constitution of the United States of America says that we have the right to and bear arms, etc.,
yes, sir.
how can any one given state override, change, or manipulate that said amendment?
So
I disagree with it. I don't think there should be any discussion about reciprocity. Reciprocity should not even exist. It should be a cross-state line, cut and dry scenario. Period.
yes, I completely agree with you. Now to give you the understanding of how we got to this point, DC versus Heller is one of the cases that allowed for states to have a little more governance over this, where,
Right.
you know,
I recall.
yep. And so understanding that the Supreme Court, for some reason, because it has the word supreme, we believe that they're supreme over the Constitution and everything else. They opened it up, and they opened up that huge can of worms, and it's been blowing back in the people's faces ever since. And so I think that your interpretation and my interpretation are certainly not only the right interpretations, but the ones that is going to be vital for helping protect our constitutional republic. It's just a matter of us getting those representatives into Congress to be able to fight back even against the Supreme Court itself, and to right the wrongs that have been done in the past. It's a messed up constitutional republic that we live in right now, because we've granted authority that wasn't there to people that weren't deserving of it.
Well, that's my theory on that matter, and a not related issue that I've got a very, very strong opinion on, and I've shared it online with different people. I've been MF'd and called a lot of names.
Oh yeah.
I really don't care, and that is voter ID.
Oh yeah.
There should absolutely, hands down, be a voter ID system. I don't care if it's thumbprint, fingerprint, nose print, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
But there should be. I mean, we can't have dead people voting.
No, I completely agree. I think that certainly, like the demand for voter ID should be there. There should be a way that these states are running their regulations and making sure that they're adhering to some form of a system that has verification processes on it. I think
that's something. I think that's something that they should actually, at this moment in time, I think they should put that in the forefront of things going on in Congress right now. I think that's something they need to put in the forefront before the next election to ensure that, I mean, let's face it, the Russia hoax thing is all a hoax. We all know that. Everybody in the world knows that. And the illegalities that were involved were ones that at this point in time can actually be prevented, and they should be prevented, and they should be stopped.
Yep. So when it comes to the voter ID, I don't want this at a national level, and here's why. So if we push this up to a national level, this is giving the federal government to have more control. Real IDs was one of those things that came out that was endorsing this. And so specifically with the Real IDs, that's already been implemented in many states and is being promised to be implemented in others. I believe we're at 48 states have either implemented it or on the route to implementing them. Is that within the Real ID, even though they told the people that this was to implement for voter IDs, right? There's no limitation on what is allowed or what is not allowed on these voter IDs or on these Real IDs, and they're not required for voters. So you aren't even required to do this, right? That was there's a constitutional Supreme Court case on this back in I want to say it was in the mid 80s, late 90s, or late 80s, mid 90s, and so the federal government can't really involve themselves in the state elections in these ways. But these Real IDs are being purported as that way. You can use them with your vote. You can use them as identification. But at the federal level, there's just so many issues there with the logistics of it and how it's being implemented. I know Ron Paul, before he left, he had a great speech on this on the floor talking about this. And so I don't think that it's necessarily a federal issue. I think it is certainly there's an impact there at the federal level, but this should be a call from the people to their state representatives.
Well, I'll agree with you. I'm not going to disagree with you, but I'll agree to disagree to the point that I think that there should be a standardized. When I say standardized, I mean nationwide, state to state to state to state, and in governance of the federal government when it comes to voting. And by me saying that, and I'm speaking on layman's terms now, because I'm not a highly educated man.
You sound plenty educated to me, good sir.
What I'm saying is, but govern the voting laws in Florida. Florida just came out of my mouth for whatever reason. I imagine that. But governs the voting laws in Florida should be the same as Louisiana and Missouri and Nebraska and Washington and Oregon. They should all be the same. There should be no variation in the laws regarding voting for any office, whether it be state or federal.
Ideologically, I do 100% agree with you. I think that there's certainly a necessity there. I think that the only difference that we have is the way that this would be implemented. But yeah, so no, I appreciate you calling in tonight, Beans. I really do. Thank you for calling back. I look forward to our future discussions. But a little bit of a time crunch.
I very much enjoyed it, and I always look forward to the show.
Thank you so much. If you want to call back later on a different topic, you're more than welcome to. But with the time crunch, we're going to try and pump out a couple more topics. So thank you again for calling in, and I look forward to our next talk.
I got you, brother. We'll get up with you.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for calling in, Beans. It's a really good topic, the real IDs and how that would be implemented. And like I said, I think that certainly we do need to have kind of a concrete system out there, and we need to have people having a structure and requirements for who can vote and who could not vote, because I do disagree with the notion that people that aren't under the sovereignty of our nation, i.e. not citizens, not somebody that's here legally, shouldn't be able to vote in our elections and to affect our elections in that way, because you can really disrupt the system depending on how many voters there are. But of course, this goes from a federal level to a state issue, and I'm a states power kind of guy. I want it down to the states. I want it as local as possible, and so certainly with California, we know that the way that California wants to run things, that there will be a huge disadvantage because of their sheer volume of population. But we can address at the federal level the number of representatives and everything else, and there is a process in which we can affect those numbers in order to diminish the voice of a state that is artificially increased in population, if you will. If you don't have a real ID, you can't fly state to state without a passport. Yes. See, they want to force you. They make it near impossible for you to be able to get from one side to another side of the country unless you get a real ID, right? They're trying to set up new legislation to force people into this. And with those real IDs, right, like I was saying before, they're not limited as to what they can or cannot put on there. So they have the basic minimums, but they don't have a maximum. So if you own a gun, if you have a concealed carry permit, if you do this, that, or the other, right, they can get all of this put onto your real ID, and it's not going to be beneficial for us at all. And Pat, you're absolutely 100% correct with that. But so we were swinging our way. We hit Georgia. We talked about the wonderful, beautiful constitutional carry being attempted to be implemented there in that state. If you don't mind, I'm gonna cool off a little bit. It is getting a little toasty. So we're gonna move up the coast a little bit. We're gonna go hit New York because New York needs to get hit on. We know that New York has not always been the biggest proponent of advocating for the Constitution, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment. They have a pretty rigid process that is just riddled with... I'm not sure if you guys could hear that or not. If you guys can, I apologize. There we go. Let me just clear that off and make sure you guys can't. So what New York is trying to push through, and this is Senate Bill 9191, pretty close to 911, but you got the extra 9 in there. And the intent of this bill is that anyone wanting to buy a pistol, buy a rifle, renew their permits, get anything involved with the purchasing of a firearm, they want you to relinquish your internet history as well as your social media accounts going back up to 3 years. So this is an attempt for them to be able to screen people and make sure that people are sane of mind, aren't looking up to commit acts of terrors or whatever it is, that they want to that they want to be able to look through this to be able to find out who is not acceptable, what views are intolerable. What are the key words that they're looking for? All of these things are, of course, not explicitly called out. They're ambiguous in the way that we've seen a lot of gun control regulations being this way. And so, of course, right, nobody should have to give up their right to privacy in order to utilize their right to protection. And so the right of privacy is obviously a Fourth Amendment issue. And, Pat just pops up with a comment that's Fourth Amendment. Yes, exactly. You don't have to forfeit your Fourth Amendment in order to practice your Second Amendment. And so it's a clear constitutional crisis here. And just thinking about that. Think about what you've done in the last 3 years. Has anyone seen like something pop up? Some friend you were in like a group text and somebody texted and said, hey, look up XYZ, go look up Blue Waffle, go look up this, that, or the other, and you clicked on it. Was any of it ever violent? Was any of it deranged? Was any of it put you in maybe a negative looking way, right? So you looked at one thing one time. Is that enough in order to disqualify you from being able to practice your Second Amendment? So they're really pushing through with this, and this is coming from their Senate, right? The Senate, not just their House. But I would hope that while this bill is attempting to be pushed, I would hope that their Supreme Court would say, you can't do that. You're not just violating people's Second Amendment rights by infringing on their ability to keep and bear arms, but you're also infringing upon their right to be secure with their person, property, papers, and effects. You just don't do this, right? You don't implement a law like this. So New York, I hope that you're able to come through and not push this, right? Not push something that is so egregious against your people. This is where, again, I'm highly distraught over the DC versus Heller case. I think that giving the states the powers over the Second Amendment was extremely contrary to the tenor of shall not be infringed. And so you don't say, well, we can't touch it, so you guys go ahead and touch it. You guys go ahead and just disfigure this, remove the arms, remove the legs, and then say you still got a Second Amendment. It's truly disheartening to see this. If I was in New York, I'd be leaving. I know I have a couple friends that do live in New York, and they're more than excited to have been getting jobs in say, Florida or in Connecticut or even Maryland. Like, they're excited to get out of California just because of the sheer idiocracy that is going on there. Whether it was from Cuomo or whoever it was from. I researched so much trouble that I would be in trouble. Yeah, exactly. So just for being informed. Oh, I did bring up Blue Waffle. Just being informed, it gets people in trouble now. And so, if you look up, I don't know, you look up the Waco instance, right, from Bill Clinton's time, or you look up any of the families that have been absolutely destroyed over constitutional crisis or constitutional issues, in that effect. Are they going to see you as an extremist, as an anti-government extremist, and want to prevent you from having guns? So it's thought police. It's thought police. It's a freedom of speech issue. There's so many different fundamental issues that comes with this. And I understand that the intent is there to protect people in order to not let bad people have guns. But the problem is that they're going to have such vague standards, and there's no way to have clear-cut answers unless it's like, how do I go and shoot somebody with a Glock 45? And the person's like, can I buy a Glock 45? Like that? Yeah, okay, maybe that would be justifiable in that one instance. But you don't just get to say, I get to go look into your phone, find all this information, and be like, oh, why'd you look this up? Right? That's clearly a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So I just don't see how this in any way is conscionable. How in any way this is a system that somebody can think, yeah, we're going to have better results, right? We're not going to unruly or in an unruly manner take away the gun rights of others. We're not going to take away the rights of people that would not have committed a crime, that were purchasing weapons in order to be able to defend their life, their liberty, their property, and their pursuit of happiness. It's going to end up in a violation of people's rights being taken away without proper due process. So it will get into the Fifth Amendment. It will get into that whole entire debacle. I can't be excited for something like this. And I hope that you guys are looking at this in just as much contempt and just as much disdain for the legislators there in New York. On educational freedom. Absolutely right, Bean. It is a limitation on educational freedom. You can't look at it this way. Can't look at it that way. And so it's got to go. It's got to go. Let me close out this one, that one, and That one. All right. So I want to go through a quick story, and I was talking about this on the TAV show group chat on Telegram. If you guys haven't found that one, send me a DM afterwards. I'll get you in. Well, actually, Kimmy's still here, so send Why Censored a message. She will hook you up with the TAV show. You can come on in there and join in on the discussions. It's always a good time in there. Everyone's just hanging out, having a good time. So I was talking about this a little bit before I went live here with you guys. And so the Supreme Court, this was from November 19th. Neil Gorsuch and Sotomayor fault the Supreme Court for declining to hear an important criminal justice case. So on November 19th, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear an important case dealing with the forensic evidence, criminal trials, and the Sixth Amendment right to defendants to confront their accusers. Writing in dissent, saying we should have seen this, Neil Gorsuch and Sonia Sotomayor criticized the court for turning a blind eye to such a constitutional malfeasance. So the court case was Stewart versus Alabama, and this is how Neil Gorsuch summarized the stakes. To prove Vanessa Stewart was driving under the influence, the state of Alabama introduced in evidence the results of a blood alcohol test conducted hours after her arrest. But the state refused to bring to stand the analyst who performed the test. Instead, they called a different one, using results of the test after her arrest at the rate at which the alcohol was metabolized. So they weren't asking to figure out how the test was conducted. They weren't asking, they weren't able to verify the ways that this entire system was being implemented. These charges were being alleged against, or being pushed against her. So she wasn't able to face her accuser, wasn't able to actually have the due process that is promised to you in the Sixth Amendment. And so this was shot down 7-2. And so this really bolstered my opinion of Neil Gorsuch, that he is there for the people. He is there for the Constitution. I think that Neil Gorsuch is still a fantastic pick for President Trump. However, who also bolstered my opinion of him was Justice Kavanaugh. So Kavanaugh voting in favor of not hearing this case. We know that he has not had a strong Fourth Amendment backbone. He's not a strong opponent against government-ran healthcare. And declining to hear a Sixth Amendment case certainly does put me on edge. So it makes me upset. It really does. Yes, I can. I will tweet it right now. So the Neil Gorsuch thing, this is Neil Gorsuch, great judge, great nomination, great appointment. I'm glad that there was no fight against him. When it comes to Justice Kavanaugh, I don't think that his hearing was necessarily fair. I think that a lot of the hubbub around him wasn't necessarily on the correct grounds. I don't think that, the allegations against him were in any way credible. I advocated for them to be heard, but they were missing out. They were missing out on the bigger pieces of the pie, and you could have went after him for his constitutional or his contrary to the constitutional views on some manner, such as the Fourth Amendment. It just brings up another issue that I see with them. Why does having a blood analyst present have anything to do with the Sixth? So when it comes to the Sixth Amendment, this has been a big controversy for a lot of things. So states that have cameras that catch you for running red lights or for speeding or for whatever it is that these cameras are doing, it's been a constitutional issue that was wrongfully decided in the past, but they were saying you can't face your accuser because your accuser is not a person. And so if you can't face it, then it falls away. Then it falls away from the Constitution, and so that's not a just process, right? Because even when people are robbed, right, we try to find out who was there. You try to find out the identity. You don't make that the only piece of evidence against somebody because he's not able to face that accuser, right? You have to have witnesses there as well. And so on those grounds, right, the analysis would be the same thing as, well, I read what the analysis said, I watched what the camera had shown me, and so it would be a violation of the Sixth Amendment in that way. So it's all right. I was reading one of the tweets that was coming at me. So here's the news that's going along on the southern border, and I think that it's important that we talk about this because I have talked about the caravan a little bit. I've talked about what we should be expecting from that entire situation. The analysis is the accuser, yes, because the analyst was the one who read the blood analysis test. They can't be at every trial. Why can they not be at every trial? No, the arresting officer is. So the arresting officer is the one that says, hey, look, this is what I saw, this is what I witnessed, and so I believed that we had enough there in order to do a blood alcohol test, and then the actual blood alcohol test is the actual piece of evidence that is an objective piece of evidence in order to justify the arrest. And so that's where the difference is, right? So it's that piece of evidence that actually enables for the DUI, the DWI, or the drunken public, whatever the charge is, it is that piece of evidence that actually enables it. So going back to the southern border, the caravan has finally arrived. So the U.S. Customs and Border Protection has closed off a couple sections of the southern border with Mexico on Sunday, and it came to a situation in which there were some of these quote unquote migrants were lobbing rocks, were actually throwing objects at the police or at the border patrol. They were attempting to climb over walls. They were attempting to climb over fences. They were determined to come in, right? If their intent was to come in and be civilized and everything else, or if their intent was to come in and to invade, it really doesn't matter, because the actions are what's important. It doesn't matter your intent, it matters the actions. And so when they were attempting to break in and break through the border, it resulted in our border patrol agents having to resort to things like tear gas. Now, of course, if you guys could imagine, what the CNNs, what the MSNBCs, what all of them were thinking when they saw tear gas, right? They thought money, they thought gold. This is the time that we have to go after President Trump and the border patrol agents and everyone else, and this is just them showing how disgusting that they are. So the tear gas was used, of course, because of the population. Because every hold on, I started reading something and then I got flipped up on that. Because of the population within this, right? The statistics of the people, right? 90 to 95% of the migrants are males, right? Are men, right? And the other 5 to 10% are the women and children. If you can imagine what the media was going to try and portray to us, if you could imagine what kind of a picture that they were going to display for us, if you imagine anything other than this, if you imagine anything other than this right here, a woman and 2 children and another young teenage-ish girl right here running as the tear gas is in the background, right? If you can imagine anything else being portrayed and being shown, then you are not paying attention to exactly what's been going on. So of course they had to use, I hope that really transitioned for you guys properly. If it didn't, I apologize, but I was showing you guys a picture of the New York Post. I will just explain it verbally. There was a full-grown woman, a young teenage-ish looking girl, and then 2 small children and a flashbang, or not flashbang, but why am I getting tied up on my words? tear gas being thrown right behind them. And so it's them fleeing, right? They had to get that small 5 to 10% of the population, and that had to be the target audience. They had to bring out the emotions. They have to make people get riled up and upset over this. But we need to have less emotions when it comes to this entire conversation. It has to be more about what the actual policy is, what the actual implementation, what the purpose of these laws are. And so I think it's very important that any country that has its own sovereignty gets to decide on who's allowed to come in or who is not. It's not up to the individual. It's not up to groups of people. It's not up to families or caravans or anyone else to determine if you're allowed on within the sovereignty of a nation, right? We just saw this with a missionary over off the coast of India, right? Going to an island in which the populace there doesn't want anyone there. And he got double knotted welcome in. He got filled with arrows. He got filled with arrows for going and trying to convert people to Christianity, right? He was going as a missionary, and he had his life taken because of it, right? Sure, you want to fight for your God and you want to do what you want to do, and that's fine, right? But the sovereignty of that area, the sovereignty of that tribe, of that island, is theirs. And so you don't get to choose to come there. And the same thing goes for the state here. The same thing goes for our country here. So you don't get to just jump our fence, jump our borders, jump our walls, and then go, now we get to spin this as you guys are the bad guys. I wish that more people would look more objectively at this. I wish that it wasn't the Democrats. I wish that Democrats would stop taking libertarian philosophies while not understanding the philosophy in its entirety, right? Because, quick history lesson, Democrats have not been in favor of open borders, right? Bernie Sanders himself had said that open borders was a right-wing thing. It was a Koch brothers thing, as he was quoted as saying. Because the Democrats were not in favor of open borders. They weren't in favor of it because they wanted to have the nationalist society, right? They were not the nationalist society, but a nationalist country in where we take care of our own and we take those burdens on. And now that they've seen that there's a political gain, there's a way that they can get voters over the slow turning of the legislation out there, that they can get more voters in the future. So they see this as a benefit. But what they missed out on the entire ideology about this, what they missed out on this entire ideology around where the open borders idea came from was from Milton Friedman, was one of the proponents of this. And his basic assumption, the basic premise of when you could have open borders was under 3 requirements. And this was for the US, right? You end the war on drugs. End the war on drugs. You allow people to be free, right? There's no necessity for drugs to be crossing your border. You end all entitlements. You don't provide a reason for people to come here. You don't provide people with the ability to gain entitlements. And then the third one, which I'm now blanking on. So we had entitlements and we had drugs. And there was I apologize. Let me look that one up real quick. Let me look that one up real quick. Milton Friedman. Go. But between those two things, do you think that Democrats want to end the war on drugs? No, right? They may be more in favor of legalizing marijuana, but they're not in favor of actually ending the war on drugs. Are they in favor of removing the welfare? No, they're actually advocating for Medicare for all. They're advocating for free healthcare, for free education. They're advocating for universal basic income. They're advocating to destroy the middle class, the upper class, in order to provide for others. So here it is. To be fully understood, Friedman's comment should be viewed as applying not merely means-tested welfare programs such as food stamps, Medicaid, public housing, but to the entire redistributive transfer state. In the transfer state, government taxes the upper middle class and shifts some $1.5 trillion in economic resources to lower income groups. I think this article might just be on just that one. I think the other one did have with regards the ability to allow all the people to be able to protect themselves and have that. Mr. Constitutionalist says they're hypocrites. Yep. I have not read Ship of Fools by Tucker Carlson. I have not. I've heard a little bit about him. I've been listening a little more to Tucker Carlson lately. When he's not on the news, I'll listen to him on his more philosophical side and his ideological side. I do agree with him in a lot of ways, right? His anti-war stances I agree with, but I will certainly listen to that. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Absolutely agree. So back to the main synopsis of this is that Democrats themselves want to cherry pick a part of a policy and be able to try to implement this in order to get political gains. But what they're advocating for is the same destruction that happened to Sweden, the same destruction that happened to Finland. There's a reason why they're rolling back their social safety nets, and that's because the burden has been too much on those that are providing, on the actual economic people there, the workers, the laborers, right? They're having to spend more to provide for others that aren't putting in at all. And that's exactly what the Democrats are advocating for here. And it's just amazing. It's truly amazing to me how many people will point to the Nordic countries and they'll say, we need to be like them. But as they start pulling back and rescinding some of those social safety nets, they go, no, not that part, not that part. Don't take that part. We don't want to learn the lessons through them. We want to learn the lessons ourselves. We want to learn the lessons ourselves. We want to destroy our own economy and then have people beg for food. Bring it down to be Venezuelan levels, to where mountains of cash will be equal to $1 of another nation. Let's get to that level. And then we can say socialism hasn't been tried for real because there was still capitalism somewhere in our country. Instead of paying attention to history, instead of looking at the world today, people are so stuck on the idea that socialism somehow is going to work when they implement it. They want it, it's going to work. It's just completely disgusting, and I advocate for everyone to listen, to go and do your own research and to look at these different countries, and you will see just of how devastating these philosophies and these policies have been. So it's a scary, scary world. So with that, guys, I'm going to be hopping off here. I want to say thank you all for joining in tonight, for liking, for the sharing, for the retweets, whether you're on Periscope or you're on YouTube. If you haven't seen me on YouTube, go ahead, find me over there, Mr. Merca, the Beard of Truth. Give me a like, give me a follow over there. Big thanks for Mr. Beans for hopping in on the phone line. The phone line is there. Anytime you guys want to call in during the show, feel free to. I'm always excited about that. So thank you all for coming in tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed your wonderful weekend. Hope you guys enjoyed your time Thanksgiving break. And I look forward to talking to you guys this Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. I am Mr. Merca, the Bearded Truth, Jason Line. Have a great night.